KMR, Kyle Mohan Racing. I'm going to talk about our Formula Drift competition Drift MX5. We got a 3-rotor turbocharged nitrous fed setup in this car. It's a really wild build, and after we kind of brought it back out for Super Drift, a little bit of a re-debut after configuring it for time attack and then unconfiguring it back for drift, we've got a lot of questions that have come in. It's a great time to talk about it before the team and I head out to Road Atlanta. So this particular car really was a test bed for what our Formula Drift RX-8 is now. This car we were running nitrous, but we also tested an anti-lag setup. I've talked about it before, but the manifold system and wastegate, this is your bypass gate here, was actually designed by Nameless, and they did the setup for Ryan Turek and a couple other Formula Drift cars that were running anti-lag setups a few years ago. Although it did work, and we still do use a version of it, in my personal opinion as a driver, as the engine builder, it was just simpler in drifting to actually run a nitrous system. And this was kind of the test for what we now use in our RX-8, which is a Nitrous Express direct feed setup. But in the MX-5, initially, before we tested out the direct feed setup that's on the RX-8, we were running a fogger. And that fogger was about a 70 shot on top of the 28 to 33 pounds of boost we were running on this car. And it was just cool to test out both setups. Again, both setups I think were fantastic and offered unique things. But me personally as a driver, not having to deal with the complication of the anti-lag system and high RPMs at odd points, the nitrous was able to create good torque, good response in areas where I lacked boost, and kind of just made it an easy car to drive. Since the rotary is already a small displacement motor, I felt like the nitrous adding horsepower and response to boost was almost a little better than just having maintained boost, because I was actually able to then add horsepower on top of it. So it's not just the boost making power, we're actually using the nitrous for spool and for power. And that was kind of what led to the direct nitrous setup and why we go with that setup now on the RX-8. A lot of people have also asked about the unique exhaust setup. We've got our twin wastegates. They are hard lined. I think in a competition car that's everything solid mounted, this is acceptable. We have broken a couple lines over the years, but generally season to season they last perfectly fine and totally acceptable in a competition car. Probably wouldn't do it in a street car if that's what you're thinking. And then the two gates here are our normal turbo boost pressure control, and then this was actually a way to at certain boost and exhaust back pressure levels create an exhaust dump that's legal per Formula Drift rules, not open at an idle, but once we were under about 8 pounds of boost, it opens up and relieves some of that exhaust pressure. So kind of a tunable exhaust system via a wastegate. We're using that precision turbo gate for that, as well as two for boost control and a precision turbo to make the boost. And it's just been a great combination. I think part of the uniqueness of sound in this particular car is the fact that it is an anti-lag setup manifold, so it does have that bypass valve still in there, and because we also have this dump gate that's actually boost pressure and computer controlled. So a little bit of insight into that setup. Very similar intercooler setup, oil cooler setup. The motor itself, very similar to what we're running in the Formula Drift car currently. It's a KMR built motor that's spec'd out to similar to what we always did at Mazda Tricks. Very large street port, studded, balanced, blueprinted everything out. The rotors have been side cut for high RPM and high boost clearance. So we're able to run these blocks season to season generally without any big maintenance. Just change the oil, change the spark plugs, and keep an eye on your water and oil temperatures. We're running NGK 11.5 plugs. We're running an excessively cold plug drifting. We're hanging at high RPM, high boost levels. We know we have high EGT levels. We're monitoring it with our Haltech ECU system. So we use those 11.5 heat range NGK Racing plugs. And for the past 3-4 years now, we've been running the renewable lubricants Biosin Extra HD, which is their racing oil. And it's a 2050. I like to go a little heavier on my cars, especially the race cars. In Formula Drift, we're usually running during the heat of the day. It's not cold temperature usage. So, you know, I like that little bit of extra viscosity. This car also has an HDT gearbox, although it's out of it right now. The interior used to be a little different than the RX-8, but I just went ahead and put in a laid down Sickie e-brake that's a lot more similar to what's in the RX-8. This one used to have a rally style e-brake, but I really didn't like having the two cars dissimilar from each other, so trying to make the MX-5 more similar as I went into Super Drift actually helped me out. I don't think I would have been able to have been so comfortable in the car, especially since it's a different feel, seating position, different wheelbase, had I have not set the interior steering wheel and e-brake position, shift position up to mimic what the RX-8 was. And we actually did that right before we went into Super Drift. So I hadn't driven this car in any real competition format or drift format for almost over 3 years. So it was pretty great to have a familiarity built into the seating setup. So I was able to jump into it. We've got the fuel cell mounted just behind the driver's compartment. It's a really short car, so we had to have Radium Engineering and Fuel Safe set us up with a custom fuel cell. And then Mishimoto racing radiator in the back. Initially, this car was built with the fuel cell further back, but the weight balance was a little odd, so we ended up bringing the fuel cell forward directly over the back axles. And I think it also made a safer car to drive, obviously protecting the fuel cell and leaving a little bit more room and crash protection for what is our radiator setup that's hidden kind of back here. It's hard to see. Fans, radiator, crash structure all back there. All of this really cool ducting was done by Matt Hill. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but some of his really nice handiwork in here. It was a really cool ducted setup, gets the air in off that roof line and down into the back. And you know, talking about the roof, I think, you know, most people don't know why we have this Lexan roof on here. It really is an issue of being able to see where you're going when you're drifting. I didn't know it was that serious, but when I built this car, it was my first convertible drift car, and it was a competition car. And you almost can't make it through any competition lap without the cabin filling up with smoke. So we ended up creating a roof that helps bring the air over the roof line and back into the radiator, better cooling, which got a little bit of the low pressure situation and swirl that was coming off of the top of the window here from sucking that smoke in from behind me. And then we also drilled these holes in the front window, which people have asked about, and it really is a matter of we were trying to get air pressure in to the driver's cockpit and cabin. So less of that back tire smoke, which was really close to the driver's compartment, the tire to driver's compartment ratio on this drift car, from swirling in there, because visibility really was a big issue. People have also asked about the bodywork. These front and rear fenders were made in-house. We made them at KMR. My buddy Cody, Matt, we all kind of just sanded, my pops. Originally, they were cardboard and foam, and we actually ended up making molds, so we've got the molds in-house. This is actually an NC chassis with parts of ND bodywork and KMR front and rear fenders made to fit. And this was kind of the third year evolution of this car, so we haven't really evolved it much since then, but that's how we got to this point. Very similar to Mad Mike's build. His MX5 was also built on an NC chassis the same year that we built this car. So as far as I know, the only two cars really like it in the world would be this car, which is a 3-rotor, and then Mad Mike's car, which is obviously the 4-rotor. So that's a little insight into the KMR Formula Drift MX5. You know, shout out to Mazda Tricks, Renewable Lubricants, Precision Turbo, Exidy Clutch, Haltech, Everybody's helped out so much. NGK with the spark plugs, and obviously we're running their new O2 sensors in conjunction with Haltech. So it's just been a really good setup, bringing this car kind of up to spec and up to pace with the RX-8, so we can have more fun with it in hopefully the very near future. So I'm gonna wrap on out of here, KMR. We got stuff to do. We're flying to Georgia really soon. So we'll get this video up, and we'll probably be in Georgia. So wrap, time to go. Drift stuff, rotary stuff.